Welcome to the Prevail Over Cancer Podcast, where we take a metabolic approach to help guide you on preventing, prevailing, and striving over cancer.
We are live. We are live on the Prevail Over Cancer Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Jeff Lopes. I got my incredible co-host, Keith Bishop. How are you, buddy?
Wonderful. It's a sunshiny day. We're finished with cold weather, hopefully. So
you are
in this season. No, you're further north, and I know you all have more problems. But oh man, we've had a tough, couple of months, and so and 70-mile-an-hour winds come through the other night, and so it's a sunshiny day. I'm looking forward to today. Tomorrow will be rainy, but oh well, we need it too.
Yeah, we've had, it was cold yesterday. I mean, when this recording happens, we'll be a couple weeks ahead,
right.
But we've had cold in our February. We're into March, but our February, we had a lot of snowfall, a lot of snow. I mean, there's certain parts up north where my cottage is, there is piles when they clean the streets, there's piles of 10, 12 feet high of snow.
Wow.
It was an incredible amount of snow, but we've also had a little spring break in between, which we had about 2 weeks where it was in the pluses, and we had some rain. So a lot of the snow was melted away, which is really nice. And I'm crossing our fingers. We're not going to see any more snow this year. And I could deal with a couple more days of cold weather, but I don't want to clean any more snow. We've had enough snow for this winter.
So we need all these changes, so that's just that's life, that's earth, that's normal. And so, but even, in this transition, say in our lives, we have changes, we have challenges, going on. And sometimes we have this cancer thing, going on. And so we have to adapt to that.
Today's topic is something I reached out to Keith yesterday, and is something through our first 33, 34 episodes we've talked about here and there. And we've actually talked about it with a couple of guests as well. And I think it's a very important topic because I just spoke to somebody, and actually Keith, before we went on air, told me a story also that we'll jump on of somebody in a similar situation where somebody gets diagnosed with cancer. The first thing they're going to do is their MD is going to set up an appointment with an oncologist. It might take a couple days to get it booked. It might take a week, but you get in there with an oncologist. Your life is turned upside down. You were told you have cancer. Never in your million years thought you'd have cancer. Even if you have lived life poorly, when I mean poorly, not eating right, or the alternative, you thought you were healthy, you thought you ate right, you thought you exercised, you thought you lived a decent lifestyle, and all of a sudden you're faced with cancer. And it's like the first instinct is automatically, and this happened to myself, it's like I was given a death sentence. And your first reaction is, I need help. And most people's first reaction is run directly to the oncologist, and whatever they say, you put your hands up in submission, wave the white flag, and just start following what they say. And I think people need to take a deep breath. For everybody that's listening to this podcast, anybody that's been diagnosed with cancer, anybody that's going to be diagnosed with cancer, because there's going to be a lot more, whether it's a family member, a relative, a friend, tell them to take a deep breath and start. I think the easiest way to do it is actually grab a book and start jotting everything down so you can have a visual. That's what I did. Journal and start. I think the first things is start understanding what alternatives are out there. What are my options? Don't jump on the first option oncology tells you. It might be the right one, but listen to every option. And we have our traditional medicine, which is our chemo, radiations. We have immune therapy now. We have alternative medicine, which are one of our last podcasts, for example, ivermectin. We have naturopaths like Keith that are doctors that are going to give you other options that are going to help heal your body. And one thing I think is very important is understanding that some of these could be interacted together and work together and be very powerful together. So I want to talk about that. Let's break down what are the traditional alternatives and other options of treatment to start with, and then we're going to start breaking down each one, Keith.
So, well, we have the traditional, which is going to be the, actually surgery, debulking, and getting rid of that tumor or tumors, and which definitely, makes sense. We've got to get rid of that bulk amount, definitely. And I understand that. Then we go into the chemotherapy options, toxic chemicals to try to kill out those fast growing cells. Definitely potential side effects, with that. And, it can be very difficult to go through that process. Immune therapy, items, these are typically items that help turn off a switch so the cancer cell can now be recognized. So the cancer cells have a tendency to hide from the immune system so that the body thinks it's this normal thing instead of knowing that it's wrong. There are side effects with those too. And some people can't take those due to those side effects. Some people tolerate it, do well, but, and matter of fact, there's also a series. Sometimes all of these things can be done all together.
Give us a couple examples. Give us a couple examples of immune therapy. Are you talking about like mistletoe and other stuff like that?
Well, I'm talking about prescription type items. And
okay, so give me an example.
There are some more natural things. Like one of them would be Keytruda.
Okay.
And so, but it actually turns a switch off. And so there's what's called a PD-1, but there's an immune switch that protects all of our cells in our body. And those drugs rather, turn that switch off so that now the immune system goes, oh, that's not supposed to be there. Let's go attack that. The problem is that it turns that switch off for everything.
Yeah.
So now it depends on the person. Some people, it may be their lungs, it may be their kidneys, it may be their pinky toe. I'm being facetious about that, but it could be any organ in the body now could be attacked by the immune system. That's the side effect, of that. And so in Europe, they try to adjust those doses based off of the weight. Here in the United States, the drug companies don't want that. They want to sell the full vial, and to make more money. So they just say everybody gets the same dose. If you're a 100-pound female or 300-pound male, you get the same thing, which doesn't make sense. And so
absolutely crazy
transition. So that's a drug-driven, reimbursement type thing that they've got going, on that. But that's a whole nother, podcast probably. And then there's radiation. Once again, to create a thermal injury, it heats up the tissue, and damages it. And then actually it's part of our immune system's responsibility to go get rid of that and eat away and destroy that, remove that out of the body. And then there are the alternative could be a term. I prefer integrative approach.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
Integrative terms and integrative items. And so, things that like support the immune system through all of that. There's the mushrooms and beta glucans that are in the mushrooms and to support this whole process, and herbs and things that we talked about and that we will talk about in future podcasts, and as part of an integrative, for example, most of these herbal type items will actually enhance the effectiveness of chemotherapy, and reduce the side effect and help the immune system to work better and improve survival. And we're starting to get more and more research on these items. And so what I consider to be like an integrative, but then that's still going to be the responsibility, primarily the patient. Okay. It is our responsibility as a patient to decide, what we're going to do and to try to find the practitioner to do what we feel comfortable with. But once again, everybody, the doctor is an expert in their area, in what they do, but they're not going to know about these other integrative or alternative. And I do want to be careful about alternative because that means actually you're going to do something totally instead of, anything else. So, once again, I think we got to weigh those different treatment options. And if anything, we have to write it down, and, the pluses and the minuses. And then what about together? integrating what are the pluses and minuses, on those things. So, I wanted to be prepared, to show that, we have to have it written down. And part of that is for the emotional and mental, spiritual aspect of, if we don't write it down, now we're just going over and over and over and over and over the same thing.
Yeah.
Over and over and over again. And we're going to waste time.
It also allows you to break down and look at it as, the way I did it was when I started, and that was literally from within the first 24 hours, I started writing all my options. And as I was writing all my options, I also started breaking down each option, and I started researching each option and researching it to the max. When I'm talking about researching, talk to other people that did it, trying to find podcasts, trying to find books, trying any type of studies, any type of literature, anything I could on it. And then I would write and say, okay, if the doctor recommends A, B, and C drug, these are the side effects. These are the long-term effects. These are the short-term effects. These are the percent what are showing survivability. And then I said, okay, if I did this change, what will it do to my body? When I'm talking about now, you're talking about changing diet, whether it's changing workouts, whether it's adding saunas. There's certain things where you want to look at it as almost a percent. And it's like, okay, this is going to give me a little better percent. This one's going to give me a little better percent, because it is a whole holistic approach. You're not going to turn around and be like, I'm going to take this one drug and I'm going to be cancer free. Because if your lifestyle brought you to that crossroads in your life, it isn't going to change unless you make the changes.
That's right. We have to change the internal environment that allowed that to happen.
Find the root cause.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that was one thing too, is if you are originally diagnosed and you do know somebody that's diagnosed or somebody's going through this situation, tell them to sit down or just focus on yourself and literally look at a terrain of your last 10 years. Try to break down as many different things, even up to 15 years in that span, whether it was moments of stress, moments of anxiety, dietary changes, lifestyle changes, environmental changes, work environmental changes, toxins. Try to break down everything you've did in a certain period of time prior and try to see what could have led to this cancer.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because if you could find the root cause, or at least some of the things that alter the root cause, that could be a huge thing for the future, is eliminating those things, right? So that was one of the first things I did too, is find my terrain from the last 5, I think it was about 10 years I focused on, and I wrote everything down, and I had a visual and say, okay, my father passed away. I did these diets. I did this. I did this. I did this. Add these all up. There's a good chance that led to this moment.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think, adds some comfort, because you at least know the reason. Now we know how to change that reason. Now we got to focus on just getting this cancer out of me and getting my body healthy enough not to deal with that again. And now it kind of gives you a footstep in the right direction. And one thing, like I said, when it comes to writing down, you're also giving yourself knowledge. So when I sat in front of oncology and they said, okay, Jeff, we want you to put you on this chemo, this treatment, I had the questions to ask. I said, what do you believe in this? Do you believe in this? Do you have any understanding of this? My research on these and this and this that you're recommending, these were the long-term side effects. What do you say about that? When they couldn't give me the answers, and science was all they focused on, they didn't want to focus on my diet. They didn't want to focus on my health. They didn't want to. That made my decision a little easier not to go to chemo route. Everybody has their own choice, but I'm saying is being able to research, write everything down, have as many questions as possible, and have as many answers already answered in as much as possible, makes your choices more concrete, more comfortable. You're not going to question your choices as much. And do you agree with that?
Yes, definitely. We have to feel confident about that, and that feedback, with what they're saying. So we have to have that peace about it. And I have people all the time that ask me that. Matter of fact, my next appointment in just a little while is a person that they just found with an ultrasound, they found a lesion, or a tumor in his body. And so we're going to go through these very same things, and about here's what you need to do, and help get started in that. And so we have that list, very important things in the history. And then all we have to do is actually just start making little changes. And I say little changes. It could be something maybe hard about the way we eat, the way we sleep, and things like that. But then we can even just kind of mark that off the list or put a little check mark next to it. Okay, yes, this is what I'm doing this week. And so we don't have to be perfect in what we're doing, but that does give us a little bit of a peace of mind knowing that we're doing something and we're not just, oh, well, we're up to whatever the doctor says, that's what we're going to do. And we feel helpless, not counting wasting time.
Yeah.
So because there's this time issue, as you know, in going through these procedures and getting, diagnoses and tests and biopsies and surgeries and there's these times. And so there, in this 1 or 2 month time frame, there's definitely things that we can do that can help address these underlying factors that could have been a driving cause, but also that's part of addressing that. But part of it is the emotional, type of thing. And more than me, I mean, I've dealt with that in my family, minor, skin cancer issue that I have, but you being diagnosed, better than me about that feeling and that hammer that just hits you and such that goes on.
And I think everybody's going to go through this. And I think you cannot rationalize and make decisions when you're feeling this is fear. Because fear puts you in a situation where you feel cornered. And when you feel cornered, you're just going to grasp the first alternative. And it might not be the best alternative. And that in reality, your first point of contact when you do find you do have cancer, for most people, is oncologist. I did my research before, but most people, their first moment is just, I got diagnosed, and you are completely shitting your pants till you sit in that office in front of that oncologist because he's the expert or she's the expert. And at that moment, you're like, oh my God, help me. And I think a lot more studies are coming out and so much more research is coming out showing that alternative medicine, whatever you interact in would you call it in integrated medicine or other, there's so many other options happening right now. There's so many more studies, and it's sad that there's not enough funding for even more studies, but there is a lot more research. And I think with social media, a lot more of the younger generation is opening their eyes to the traditional medication and how it affects your body and how much damage it does to your body. So I think it's very, very important for us. Like I said, I can't stress enough is do not make a decision on fear. Take a deep breath, write all your options down, understand it's okay. And we talked about this in past podcasts. Reach out to Keith, reach out to some of our guests, reach out to me, reach out to anybody that's either been in the situation or an expert in that field and ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the biggest issue is people get so closed off, and you were talking about this prior to our podcast starting with the gentleman that you were talking about, is they get closed off and they don't want to listen to no one else. They don't want to hear the other options. And when they do start listening to the other options, it's usually a little too late by then. And you have to understand that you have to make the lifestyle changes right off the bat. And one more thing before you jump in there, Keith, is if you do decide to go the surgery route, to me is probably the smartest route because you do want to get that cancer out of you. That's my alternative thought is you want to get that cancer out of you. And if you're doing that surgery route, it's not just the surgery. You got to prepare your body physically and mentally for that surgery. So your body is so healthy that when it does that surgery, your body will recover faster. Your body's cells will keep cleaning out anything that's left in there. So you need to prepare yourself. And that comes from diet, supplements, lifestyle, saunas, red light. There's just so much alternatives, and it might sound overwhelming, but you have to engage yourself in that with an expert like Keith that could kind of make it easy for you, guide you in the right direction so you don't feel so overwhelmed.
Yeah. So, we have this kind of like an age issue in this whole process too, meaning older people like my parents, they were born, after World War II had started. And for them, and actually for their parents, so my grandparents, medicine was the new thing.
Yeah.
And penicillin, came available, and literally saved, millions of lives probably, and some medical treatments definitely had some impact and became the mainstream, pretty quick. Before that, it was alternative medicine. Okay.
Yeah.
It was folklore and traditional herbs and things like that. I mean, and so integrating, traditional medical, can have some benefits, but then, there's this tendency that I see, older people have a tendency to follow more about what the doctors say. To a certain extent, that's not always the case. I have some 80-plus-year-olds that are definitely, going in and wanting to do other integrative, type treatments, definitely. But there is a tendency for people that are in their 60s and 70s at this stage, to go more with what just the doctors say, and then the younger people have a tendency to question it more. They're raised a little bit different, and then social media, like you mentioned. Matter of fact, it's very interesting to watch social media. It is more of a young person's type source of information and become mainstream now. But it's when we look at kind of the integrative and alternative thing, it's the younger people that are doing it, making the videos and showing about even homesteading and alternative lifestyles. And so it's really neat to see the young people doing that. There are some of us older, people that are also doing that, but, it's so neat to see the younger generation, leaning more toward that and willing to explore and learn more and try to integrate these other, treatment type things. So, it is a challenge, and probably, and we have a saying in the country, got a horse here. So you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink.
Yeah.
Okay. And so if you have a loved one and they are not willing to, go into these other things or these alternatives or integrative or even just, something that seems like it should be so simple to do, the only thing we can do is provide them, give them that information. That's what I did last night with a friend of ours. I gave him that information, a couple of different sources of information that should resonate with him. I tried to come up with a way to make it pleasant for him and with his beliefs and lifestyle to help him to look at these things. I don't know if he's going to make that change. And so, but knowing that I did everything I could, I feel better about myself, and I just pray that he's willing to do that. And we come across those things all the time, and all of us are going to have that opportunity with family, loved ones, friends, to provide that information about, okay, here's some other sources. So we do need to be, even if we're not quite ready, be able to say, hey, I'm going to send you some information. I'm going to get back with you. And so there is a lot of information now that is available. So whenever when you were, first diagnosed in the fear thing, how did you work through that?
I mean, we've talked about this before. I mean, I'm a little different mindset. I mean, maybe because I've been an entrepreneur for 29 years, I've always been self-reliant on myself. And so I didn't have that mindset where I needed to rely on a doctor, rely on somebody like that. So I literally went automatically to the web, which is scary because you find a lot of misinformation, a lot of scary things on there that really plays into your emotion at that time. But I kind of weaved my way through all that, and I said to myself, I need to just, when we talk about this, and this is something I think everybody should pay attention to, is focus on the controllables. Focus on what you're able to control. Do not focus on stuff that are out of your power. I don't know if I'm going to be here a year from now. None of us know if we're going to be here a year from now. You can walk out the street and get hit by a car tomorrow. So have that mindset where I'm here now, I'm alive now, I'm breathing now. What am I going to do today to alter my course? And that's what I did every single day, was focus on today. And what I could do today is I'm just gonna research and find as many alternatives and have as many questions, and then start the next day. Let's focus on this. Let's focus on this appointment. So all I did was focuses on the controllables. That was one. Second is emotionally, I just kept telling myself, I have a reason to live. Whether it's your loved ones, your children, I have a reason to live. I have a reason to fight. I have a reason to be here. So I got to focus on those reasons and make that give me the power and the strength to get through this. And another thing too is really understand that cancer is not a death sentence. There's thousands to millions of stories probably that people are diagnosed with stage 4 cancer and 15, 20 years later, they're striving. So it is not a one case situation where everybody that diagnosed is going to die. That is not what happens. There is a huge amount of sad stories, but there's so many beautiful, inspiring stories that people that have decided to make the altered changes, that have mentally focused, physically focused, surrounding themselves around people like yourself, Keith, that have helped them make the right decisions and the right choices. So I think you have to look at these inspiring stories, and we're doing that with bringing people on our show, and listen to these and take these as inspiration. That, hey, like if this guy did it, I could do it. If this young lady did it, I could do it. This is not something where it's impossible. I just need to really understand what is the best option for me, and how, and also have that understanding is you can have 5, 10, 15 cars in your life. You could own 3, 4 homes in your life. You could buy another pair of shoes. You only have one body.
Mm-hmm.
If you're willing to spend money and time on other crap, but you're not willing to spend the money and time on yourself, then you're making your own choice right there. And I had that in my set. I had that in my mind where whatever I needed to do supplement wise, I did 6 months of vitamin. We'll talk about it as an alternative, just as an added bonus, vitamin C IV. I did I took other alternatives, and they're not cheap. You have to spend the money. But I thought if I'm in a way, I'm investing in my health, my future. Everything else doesn't matter. If you don't have your health, you don't have your future. I say this all the time. You could have the Ferrari in the driveway. If you're in the possible bed lying down, that Ferrari means absolutely nothing. So focus on spending the money, the energy, the time on healing and strengthening yourself. Everything else will come after.
Perfect. Yes. And so true. But some people are also going to emotionally struggle. So, meaning, you and I are very similar, actually. We are entrepreneurs, and we're driven, and we have goals, we have family, we have things we want and need to do, and in our lives. And so we're driven. But some other people, everybody is different, and some people struggle more. And so I do, for example, I have a couple of counselors that I refer to.
Yeah.
And so I have some people that need that help, and seeking some emotional, professional, help, can be very important to help get our mind set right, to be able to get rid of these thoughts that just keep going over and over and over and over in our mind with that trauma, of that diagnosis, and, and seek help, I think is important, whether it be like, I'm not the counselor to help a person each week, get through their emotional type thing, because I
am sure you get a lot of people telling you stories that it's almost like you're almost like the barber, the hairdresser that has to listen to the stories every week.
Well, I do have some people. Matter of fact, I do have some people that do want to talk to me every week. Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
I don't consider myself to be a counselor in that way. Yeah, I'm more.
But sometimes just being the ear is important.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. And along that line, therefore, that friend, we need to cultivate that support group, family and friends, and we need to support that small group. I know you isolated yourself from the thousands of people, and just went to super small. And just concentrate with just a few people that could support you to help cut down on that noise. And
through the process for the first 2.5 months till I did my surgery. I think that is important too, is surround yourself with a small, that's great point you brought there, is surround yourself with a smaller, very supportive group. Anybody that's negative in your life, and you're going to get a lot of people, even your closest family, Keith, you think are going to be supportive, they're the ones to be like, listen to the doctor, don't do this. Why are you eating this? Eliminate all that. Eliminate that. Shut that door. Hang up that phone. You need to surround yourself with people that are going to be positive. They're going to give you positive energy, part of the positive vibes. A smaller group, contained, just so you get through that initial stages. Because I think that is so important, because you could be as positive you want, but if people are chirping your ears and you're hearing all this noise, it's hard to focus. So that is a very good point. That was one thing I did, was surround myself with a very, very small amount of people that knew the situation I was going through. And those were my support staff. Those are the people that I knew had my back. And if I needed somebody just to talk to, like I had a couple of friends where they'd be like, listen, my phone's 24 hours a day is open. And actually I was talking to one of them today. He said, my phone's 24 hours a day open. Call me, even if I won't say a word. I'll just listen. He actually said that to me right off the bat. And I think that's so important. And I did probably call him a couple times just to let my emotions out, because you do need that. You do need that. And I think another alternative is meditation.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. What is your thought process on that?
Oh, I'm big into that. So, and everything from some prayer with a supreme being and trying to lift that to some of these burdens to, something else, somebody else. I think it's very important, but also we have to practice, and that's what, we have to practice that, and whether it be prayer, but also through meditation. And meditation is actually more like clearing your mind, of all this stuff going on.
Yeah.
And so, and I do this every single day. And matter of fact, it's amazing. I have a free download on my website called Therapeutic Breathing for Cancer.
Yeah.
That is actually breathing techniques and concentrating on where you put your tongue and how you breathe in through your nose and breathe out through your mouth, and how you concentrate that and how you feel your belly drop, and counting those breaths. And while you're doing that, it's difficult, not impossible, but difficult to think about all these other problems. These other problems are going to sneak in. And if they are that's normal. Don't panic about that, but just get rid of that and just start over again and go through that. And it's amazing. The emotional benefits, of clearing your mind is tremendous, just for a few minutes. Matter of fact, after I do something like that, sometimes it's like, oh, wow, that's a neat thought. I could just kind of like an answer to one thing I was thinking about. I mean, that I wasn't really thinking about recently, but it's like, oh, I've got an idea for something.
Yeah.
So there's some emotional, spiritual type benefits, and then the physical type things. Even I have a tendency to be acidic. We talked about that before.
Yeah.
And so I can do just 5 minutes of breathing exercises, and my saliva pH increases by 0.4 of a point.
Yeah.
I'm not as acidic. I've blown off that acid, and then my blood pressure will drop 10 points.
Yeah.
So there's the physical, aspect of doing some meditation and prayer, and some of that actually is just going out for a walk.
I was about to say that.
And so I try to do that too.
Yeah.
Weather permitting. I'm hoping today's going to be warm enough and not 50-mile-an-hour winds like we've been having. And so we can get out and go for a walk after lunch and try to take those little 5-minute breaks, every hour to do something to get out of that routine. And even if you're doing research in for your cancer, you have to take a break from that too.
Yeah.
That's work. That is work.
Yeah.
That is physical and emotional work and stress.
Emotional. Very emotional.
We have to take a break from that.
Yeah.
And the physical aspect of that is part of that. So whether it be, meditation, exercise is extremely important.
Yeah.
And it's not like you have to be in the gym exercising, but there's things that we can do at home. And I just tell my clients, they say, well, Keith, what should I do? And I say, well, what do you like to do? What is easy?
It could be playing tennis. It could be playing a sport. It could be
doing a rebounder.
That's all it is. Yeah.
Whatever. And that's what we're going to go for. Now, sometimes I may actually encourage some people to do some resistant exercise to build up their muscles.
Yeah.
So sometimes I may say, well, okay, yes, continue those things, but now let's do some other resistance type things to build up your muscles and your joints, because that rebounder is not quite enough for your whole body.
No.
Yeah, you enjoy it. That's great. But let's kind of, take 5 minutes and let's do some other resistant type things, using your body for resistance or simple hand weights or something. So, but those are very important too.
Yeah.
So what, did you do much exercise type
Oh,
thing?
yeah. I exercise right through. I mean, I've always been into fitness. I mean, that was back in college. I graduated with fitness leadership. I mean, I've always been into fitness, right?
Okay.
And fitness was something I took to the next level. So I always did saunas on and off. I took that to the next level. I took everything to the next level. And even when I did my surgery, February 16th, I did my surgery. Doctor's like 6 weeks. Like, I got cut up 5 spots. Like, he's like 6 weeks. I was supposed to be in the hospital between 5 to 7 days. I was out in 40 hours. And my house, we have an open concept with an island, which is maybe, I don't even know how many steps around there, maybe 150 steps around that island. Day I got home, I started, and I would actually jot it in my journal every day. Okay, today I did 3 laps. The next day I did 6, and I would force myself every day to try to get another 5, 6. And I did that. And I didn't. It was winter, February 16th in Canada. It was cold, and I wanted sunlight. So my daughter's bedroom faces west, and she has out all these windows. And I would literally open the curtains, open up the windows, get fresh air, even though it was cold, and just let the sun hit me. And I would sit there for 15, 20 minutes meditating. And I would do that twice a day. And I would just walk to the point where I was able to start getting on the treadmill at home and start walking the treadmill. And then I slowly, I think it was within 10 days, 11 days, I was really back at the gym working out. And I started lightly with the weights, and then I got right back into the process, right? So understanding that, how important health is when I'm talking about working out. And it's not only the physical stuff, because if you are going to go through the biggest battle in your life, you want to physically be strong enough to deal with it, but also the stress you're literally relieving by working out. All the cortisone, all that crap you're getting out of your body, all the acid you're removing from your body. So it's just the benefit of that. I want to talk about meditation quickly, that you brought all these points. You have to have that mindset. Even if you're not religious, meditation has nothing to do with religion. It's focusing on your breathing.
Correct.
And also, there are so many forms of meditation. You could really engage yourself and become an expert and literally get into the zone and be sitting on these perfectly made little sofa beds and really zoning and putting the proper music in your ears. But it could be also just literally, like you said, going for a walk, listening to a podcast. It's just spending time where you're focusing on your breathing and cleaning your mind, focusing away from the alternative of what you're dealing with at that moment, being able to just put it aside for 5-10 minutes and just breathe, relax, clean your mind, get ready to restart. And I think that's important. And that meditation could be even 2-3 minutes, and it could be spread 4 or 5 times in a day. Like you said, every couple hours. Take 2-3 minutes and just focus on your breathing. Just clean your head. Okay, let's start again. I think that is very important. Meditation is not put into one square box. There's so many different ways and forms of it.
Yes, and in our mind can really only do one thing at a time.
Mm-hmm.
We can't really multitask now, but like a computer only can do ones and zeros. It can only do one thing at a time, but it does it very fast. Well, our mind can also do things very fast. And yes, we can hop around, but that's the purpose of the meditation, is to, clear the mind, but sometimes we have to focus on something else with that. So that's going to be the purpose of whether it be exercise, because now we're concentrating on what we're doing and how we're breathing. Now we're not thinking about that challenge that we're having to deal with. The same thing with walking, that helps us to, notice nature and the sky, whether it be blue or thunderstorms, whatever. But to focus on these other things, is so important. And the grass and the squirrels and
the fresh, the
air, and concentrate on these things, and try not to focus on the things that you were just working on and thinking about. Take that little break, that 5-minute break, and whether it be walking or exercise or my friends, it's kind of like every hour, my goal is to do something
Yeah.
else. And besides me working. And so in between appointments, I try to set aside 15 minutes so I can take that little break and, and to do something, before that next appointment starts.
Yeah.
And so, and matter of fact, sometimes I'll even just send a message to my client, say, hey, I need a couple of minutes. And that, they don't know why, but it's like, that other appointment was stressful and I need to take this a little bit of a break. I need to do some breathing, to relax and clear my mind and get ready to dive in and address the problem. So, with that. So yes, there's many different ways to go about those type things. And also if need be, and some people need that professional help to help
get in that
train
zone,
their mind to cope, and things like that.
I think from every podcast, we seem to focus on one or two things that we could talk other podcasts about. And I think therapy is something we should talk about in another podcast. And definitely, I think we could actually focus on meditation in other podcasts and actually talk about alternatives and actually dive deeper into it. And just even listening to the 432 frequencies and different stuff like that, they're more healing frequencies that allow your body to come. So we'll talk about it. I actually want to make that one podcast as well. One on meditation and one on therapy, because I think there is other options with therapy. There's, I think, something called BetterHelp now is an online therapy. So if you in a remote area and you don't have access to a therapist, there is, they actually sponsored us in their last podcast, so I should reach out to them. But they, it's called BetterHelp, and they have a database of like thousands of therapists that meet you on a Zoom.
Yeah,
and it's a lot more affordable, and they're all registered therapists. So there's other options that we could talk about on that podcast. I just want to just dive back and just kind of do a little kind of review of this whole podcast. Is like everything, every week we start with one thing and we go it is information overload, which I love because I think it's so beneficial to everybody listening, and our audience is growing and growing. What we started this podcast is when you are originally diagnosed, if you know somebody that's been diagnosed, a family, friend, a loved one, take a deep breath. You have time to make decisions. Don't jump on the first option that's presented to you. Find as many alternate options as possible. Lay them out, grab a journal, write them all in, figure out the positive, the negatives of everything, and then make the right decision that's for you, that's cultivated for you. You're not jumping on the first thing and then regretting it later. And I think a lot of people, with what we talked about, fear, jump on the first alternative, whatever their oncologist says, not thinking of the other options, whether it's immune therapy, whether it's integrative therapy, alternative therapy, whether it's there's so many options. And one last thing I wanted to say before you can finish off, Keith, is when you do sit down with your oncologist, right off the bat, I would recommend to everyone, ask that oncologist, are they open to working with an alternative medicine or a natural path, or a gentleman like you, Keith, or somebody else? Are they open to working with other people integrative with their program? If they say no right off the bat, that's a red flag.
Okay? It makes it difficult, and so you do have to have a team that supports your interest.
A team, exactly.
A team for that. So it's very important to have that team. And now there's also ways you can, most doctors, well, let's put it this way, there are very few alternative oncologists or integrative oncologists.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very
just a few, very few. So you're not going to find them, more than likely. And so therefore you do have to work with, your doctors, and you can actually even, kind of, I call it stroke them a little bit and encourage them some and let them feel like that they're in charge.
Yeah.
And say, doc, I appreciate you helping me so much. And, I do want to also kind of integrate some other, food and supplement type things. And, and I realize how important your stuff is. Can you support me in this journey?
Yeah.
And let them know that you value them. They are a specialist. They do have special training. They do have special insight. But to include them, they have to know that you want to include them. If you say, well, Doc, what about this particular thing? I want to do this. Well, that once again, there's kind of a psychological approach that you can use in dealing with a doctor that's used to being in charge.
Yeah.
To help out.
Yeah.
And there's still going to be some that say, nope, you can't do anything whatsoever.
Yeah.
So you have to make that decision about what you're going to do. It is your life, your body, your health. And so you can make that decision on what to do.
I think we ended right there. I think that's very important. I was waiting to add that in. It is your body. It is your health. At the end of the day, you have to focus on yourself. You have to focus on what's best for you. You have to focus on what is going to allow you to put your pillow on your resting every night and you feel you've made the right decision. You could close your eyes and have a good night's sleep because you made the right decision, not wake all night questioning your decision. So understand you have to do what's right with your intuition, with your gut, and understand that it's you. At the end of the day, you're not a number, which is sad to say. Our medical system in North America, Canada, US is the same crap. You're a number. You're given a health card number, you're a number. And you don't want to be a stat. You want to be you do want to be a stat on the positive side. So understand that focus on what is going to give you the best option and what is going to keep you around for the longest time. So just focus on that, focus on yourself. So I love that you said that. I think we ended it right there, buddy. This is awesome.
Good. Yeah, it's wonderful, Jeff.
You're the best, Keith.
Oh, you too for sharing this and producing this. Everybody needs to know that your team is one that's putting this together. So it's great.
But we could stroke each other's ego because without you, this wouldn't be happening. This would be just a cancer survivor telling stories. So this is your expertise is what keeps the engine running and keeps everybody tuning in to learn more and learn more and learn more. So I appreciate that. And I hope many of our listeners that are going through situations reach out to you and get the benefit from everything you're doing and how many people you're helping.
Yeah, exactly. Let's keep going.
Thank you, buddy. See you next week.
All right. Bye.